On. Okay.
So, welcome everybody to Adventures by the Book, where our mission is to connect people and communities through the superpower of
How's
books.
this?
I'm your host, Susan Macbeth, and I'm excited to host not one, not two, but three creative geniuses today in our program from story to film. We haven't done this type of interactive event before, and my camera skills, as I mentioned just a minute ago, are not Zeinabu quality. So bear with us, but we're doing the best we can because we're really excited to have this interactive chat available and for you to be able to talk with three really talented creatives today. So I want to start with Marc. In October 2020, Marc Chery, who is the supervisor in the humanities section of the San Diego Central Library, founded the San Diego Decameron Project. He was inspired by the 14th century Decameron that we all are familiar with, written during one of the worst plagues in history. So Marc asked San Diego writers to contribute short COVID-related stories. Out of the hundreds of entries, one particular short story stood out, Pandemic Bread, written by award-winning San Diego author Marivi Soliven, who you will hear from shortly. Marc, this is really a fabulous project. Welcome to Fireside. And we'd love to hear more about, maybe you can just give a brief description of the Decameron Project, the 14th century, for those people who aren't familiar with it. And then what inspired you to start the San Diego Decameron Project? And then what in particularly were you touched by with Marivi's story, Pandemic Bread?
Oh, well, thank you, Susan. The Decameron Project was was I guess what I'm trying to say, four community-based organizations came together. The San Diego Public Library, the La Jolla Historical Society, San Diego Writers Inc., and Write Out Loud. The person from our partners from the La Jolla Historical Society was reading the Qumran because we were deep in the epidemic. So like a lot of people did, he went back searching for how humanity dealt with prior epidemics. And then I got a call from the person from Write Out Loud, and we started to the four groups started to talk, and then we decided that. Inspired also by the New York Times. The New York Times had also remembered the book, the Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio, written in 1348 written in 1348. And then the New York Times invited some very famous writers to submit short stories that the New York Times published in their paper. We thought we could do something similar here, and that's how the San Diego Decameron project started. So we invited. We what you do when we met. We decided how we were gonna do it. The main part being to invite writers from San Diego County to submit stories. We got over 200 stories by San Diego writers, and then we recruited judges. The judges were librarians, writers who weren't going to submit anything into the project. Teachers, we had around 25 judges, and we told them, like myself and the other folks, we never saw the stories. the only folks who saw them were the judges. So they went through them. There was a first round. They came up with the top 20. Uh, the top 20 were read by all of the judges. They were vetted. They were vetted. You know, we're a public library. They were vetted not to censor anything, in case in case there was strong language, so that we would know, in case folks complain about the strong language, so we would know. We didn't want to be surprised. So in any case, the final round was the judges coming up with the top 10. As I said, all of the judges read the stories multiple times, and they came up with the top 10. And then Marivi's story happened to be one of the top 10. And that was when, once the top 10 were chosen, we, the library and the other partners, we got to see the stories. And I was particularly glad to see Marivi's name, because she's a friend. And um, and I read her story, and it just blew me away. Some of the other stories too blew me away, but hers particularly blew me away, because um, um, in our family, we lost someone to COVID. So that, plus the fact that Marivi is she has a way with language, and it's just, it speaks to you at a very deep level. I read it, and then I went home, started to call some friends and relatives, including Zeinabu, to let her know that to let them know that I had read this wonderful story, because I read a lot, not just because I'm a librarian, but uh, and then Zeinabu asked, could she see the story, and I teased her, letting her know that she had to wait until the online anthology was published on the website of the library and the three other community organizations. So when she read the story, Zainabu, she was as moved by, not only by the story, but also by the language. I know that Zainabu loves, um, like me and like Marivi and Susan and you too, Susan. We love uh, language, not just beautiful language, but language that hits you right here. So she read it, and she fell in love with the story. And then when we were, and then first there was the anthology, and then when the book was published, Zainabu was the first. She told me that she wanted me to loan her my own personal copy. And oh yeah, my own personal copy. And she said that she would be the first in line to get the book when it came out. And she also wanted to see Marivi read the story herself. When Zainabu first heard the story, it was performed by actors. The top 10 in the online anthology were performed by actors, and they did such a beautiful job. So that's basically what how the San Diego Decameron project started, and how I and also Zainabu came onto the story.
Well,
which we love, which I love, and which will stay with me forever.
well, it's a fabulous project. Congratulations, Mark. And if you want to hold up the San Diego Decameron Project Anthology, of which Mary V's is one of the stories told in there. And actually, she's going to be reading from that. This is a real special treat, and that's why we wanted to do it this way. You better get out your tissue. I'm telling you right now, because Mark is right that it does just reach right to your heart, and you will see why it's such a special story. And when people read it in years to come, who think back on their experience with COVID, or who those who were born after and didn't experience, they're going to see what went on in a very human way. So before I asked Mary V to read her short story, Pandemic Bread, I want to share a little bit about Mary V. She has authored 17 books, including this one, The Mango Pride, winner of the San Diego Book Awards and also the Polanco Awards, which is the Philippine counterpart of the Pulitzer Prize. So we're talking big deal here. Her flash fiction piece, Pandemic Bread, was ranked in the top 10, as Mark said, among the 100 stories that were published in the San Diego Decameron Project Anthology, which we just showed you. Her day job as a phone interpreter enriches her stories, even as it allows her to support her immigrant community. Welcome, Mary V. It's an honor to have you here today, and I can't
Thank
wait to
you.
hear your story. And I'm telling you, get out your tissues now. And I'm hoping I don't need it because I've read it multiple times and I think I've
Oh,
cried out, but it's a beautiful story. So you are on.
yeah. So I just wanted to preface this. Like, this is I started baking out of a need to like calm myself because at the height of the pandemic, I was doing at least one end of life call on the phone, interpreting for families, Filipino families whose beloved were dying. And it was very hard for me to process it. So baking and kneading flour is very quiet, so I can do it when I'm on the phone and nobody knows. And that was the genesis of this story. So the story is called Pandemic Bread. I first performed it for Generation Women a year before it came out in the Decameron Project, and here we go. Luz was flouring the carrot top when the call came in, and she answered on the first ring. This is Luz, your Filipino interpreter. How may I help you today? This is Dr. Goldstein. I'm about to speak to my patient, but I want to give you some background before I enter the room. Of course. Luz gently punched the risen dough and tipped it onto the counter. Baking was easy, quiet. She could do this as they spoke. She wore a headset the way construction workers wore helmets and did chores while interpreting from home. This, however, was no chore, but her weekly stress baking ritual, her way of coping with the pandemic. My patient Remedios Rojas is 87 years old and has COVID pneumonia. Her condition has worsened drastically, and we have got to talk about treatment options. I must warn you, it may be a difficult conversation, Dr. Goldstein said, speaking in the matter of fact manner of a doctor who had seen sorrow but kept a professional distance. I'll do my best, doctor. Luz nudged the dough into a rectangle, taking comfort in the simple predictability of flour, milk, and sugar transformed by yeast. Had she not read somewhere that yeast was a virus, just like the one that had recently upended the world? But nothing was predictable about COVID 19. And then the swoosh of a door opening interrupted her thoughts. Hello, Remedios. How are you feeling today? Gandang araw po, Remedios. Kumusta po kayo? Luz inserted the honorific po as she interpreted. Small courtesies went far in soothing an anxious patient. Okay lang, Doc? I am feeling better today. Luz strained to hear the faint voice amid the hum and beeps of machines that surrounded her bed in place of a husband or children. Many days had Remedios been alone. I'm glad you're comfortable. Unfortunately, your condition is deteriorating. We're giving you the maximum amount of oxygen now, but with your pneumonia, that is still not enough. Unless we intubate you, things will get worse. Luz kept her voice steady as she conveyed the bad news. Last February, friends in Manila, a married couple, had fallen ill with COVID and both of them were intubated. Only the husband had come out of it alive. Ay, naku, no! The patient's voice was tremulous but resolute. I already said no. No intubation. Remedios, do you remember giving your daughter durable power of attorney? You said Lisa could make decisions about your medical care. Oo naman. But I can disagree with her decision. Remedios slapped away that comment as easily as Luz punched down her dough. I can still say no. As she interpreted for each one, Luz caught herself mirroring Remedios' frustration. This was a bad sign. She was not supposed to take sides, particularly not the side of the Filipino. Hoping to put some distance from this fraught situation, she reached for the cup of crumbled cheese. And yet Dr. Goldstein persisted. Do you notice how fast and shallow your breath is? That is a sign that your heart is working harder to get oxygen. It is under extreme stress. And if it suddenly stops beating, we will be unable to resuscitate you unless you are intubated. It did not surprise Luz to hear Dr. Goldstein pleading with his patient. Her mother and her aunts possessed the same unbending will. I am 87, old enough to be your grandmother, Dr. Goldstein. If my time has come, I am ready. Araw-araw ako'y nagdadasal sa Panginoon. Hindi niya ako pababayaan. Luz released the breath she had been holding as she relayed Remedios' declaration. Every day I pray to God. He will not forsake me. How many times had her own grandmother said, as cancer sucked her life away? I believe in miracles too, ma'am. Dr. Goldstein spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. But my medical experience tells me otherwise. I'll be completely honest. If we do not do anything now, your lungs will fill with fluid and you will struggle to breathe. Eventually, your lungs may fail and so will your heart and your other organs. Luz swore she heard a sigh, but from who she could not tell. Your daughter wants us to do everything possible to keep you alive, but I am your doctor first, Remedios. I will only do what you want, even if it goes against your family's wishes. Luz's hands shook as she spread crumbled cheese down the center of the dough. She did not envy Dr. Goldstein's position. If Remedios' family was anything like hers, there would be rage and tears and unrelenting pleas to reconsider the decision. Ganoon? What I want is to go home to spend my remaining days with my daughter and my grandchildren. Can I please not do that, Doc? Luz's throat thickened as she relayed the question. She already knew the answer to this one. I wish we could discharge you, but that is just not possible. COVID is so contagious we cannot even allow visitors to this ward. If you would like, I will have your nurse set up a FaceTime call. Remedios coughed at just then, an alarming series of grating, deep throated barks that eventually faded into the banal hum of machines. And Luz imagined her sinking deeper into her pillow, breaths coming quick and shallow as she considered the days that lay ahead, each one folding into the next, petering off to the solitary end. Tears fell unnoticed as Luz rolled her dough out into a thick bun. In that distant hospital, an old woman contemplated death, even as she herself prepared bread for dinner. Each conclusion now as inevitable as the other. She could not continue. She could not stop. If your mind is made up, I'd like to call your doctor now to tell her, Dr. Goldstein said, his voice heavy with resignation. Ingat po kayo, Luz urged Remedios to take care as she ended that call. They would never meet, but Luz felt she knew the old woman now as intimately as her own grandmother. beloved and familiar as bread.
Just beautiful. And I think in that short story, Marivi conveyed exactly what the importance of storytelling is that behind those statistics, those millions of people that were affected around the world and people that died around the world because of COVID, they are all individual stories like this, human beings, faces, families affected, like Marc's beloved family member who passed away from COVID as well. Each one of them deserves their story to be told and to be heard. And I think this anthology is a beautiful testament to that, Marc. So thank you for that, Mary V. The
Thank
story
you.
was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And since bread making and kneading the bread was so therapeutic to her and was so integral in her story making, we wanted her to give a little replica of what that was like. So she's actually going
Okay.
to be preparing bread for us here on screen. While she's doing that, I want to invite anyone who's in the virtual audience. You can invite yourself up on stage and chat live with actually Marc, Zeinabu, or Mary V about any of this. You can ask questions, you can make comments, you can just say hello, what the story means to you, how COVID has affected you, questions about the story to film process. All you have to do to invite yourself up on stage is go to that little round circle in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, and you'll hit that, and there's a button that says invite to stage, and we can accept that and chat with you live. But while we're waiting for anyone who wants to join us, I'm going to ask Mary V to do her bread making demo. And while she's doing the demo, I want her to talk us through what she's thinking about, what she's processing in that creative mind about her story making, what she was thinking in this particular story, anything else you want to share with us, Mary V. So,
Sure.
and she's an incredible cook. So I have to suffer through all of her social media posts. I hope you guys follow her on social media because she posts her meals all the time, and I just drool wishing that I could be adopted into her family. So here's your chance to experience that a little bit, and I'm hoping that we get to eat a little bit of that bread when we're done. So take it away with your bread making.
Okay, so this is a New York Times recipe. It's called blue cheese swirl bread, and it's been very happily like rising. It's overcome, like it went over the bowl, so it's ready, basically. And the fun about it is, and I like composite things, is baking is really quiet. And when you're interpreting, you're not allowed to do anything. But since it's over the phone interpreting, and kneading the dough is a very quiet, relaxing, repetitive motion, I can get away with it. And so this story actually happened. Like I happened to be doing my kneading, and the end of life call happened, and I literally use the repetitive motion of kneading the bread, rolling it out, knowing that at the end of like a couple of hours, I would have a nice loaf of bread, even as somebody was dying on the other end of the phone. And so the calls, and I've had to do, like I said earlier, I've had to do at least once every month um, an end of life call. It's become this way of dissipating stress without interrupting my workday, and I found it to be an incredible way to stay sane. Really, um, fun fact, not super fun. Filipinos comprise 4% of the entire nursing population in the United States, but since the COVID pandemic has happened, they have account for 31% of all deaths in the nursing population. So you have to think about that. One out of every three nurses that died in COVID was Filipino, and I think it speaks to our culture's inability to say no, and compassion, and willingness to help out when somebody is in need. And so this is my tribute to them, to all of those health workers who were impacted, and they went into a room where somebody was dying of a disease that at the time nobody knew how infectious it was, and then they themselves contracted it. And and I just want to think about that because um, of all the many people who passed away because of COVID, and since I've been doing these end of life calls, I have become an absolutely like an advocate for vaccines. Like I am a fan of Dr. Fauci. I don't care what anyone says about like his missteps. Like when he says get a vaccine, I'm like, sign me up for the next needle puncture because like I've seen how awful it is and it's not fun. So anyway, the when I was taking this call, I was basically crying into the dough because this woman was dying, and as it happened in the story, she just wanted to go home, and the doctor was like, "Well, actually, no, you can't go home. You're gonna die, and you unfortunately gonna have to die alone. But we can do a FaceTime call, and and just think about the heartbreak of that when that happens. So
And for those who can't see at home,
yeah.
what are you putting in the bread?
It's blue cheese. It's blue cheese, and then it's a basically it's instant yeast with like a lot of milk, and then you slather it with butter, and after another half hour of like rising, you put it in a hot oven, and then it rises, and it turns into like Filipinos will understand this. It turns into something that looks like an empanada. It's gorgeous. It's delicious. It's savory, and it's you know
And you call it pandemic bread, but if people are looking for the recipe,
Oh
say
yeah,
New York Times, what
it's
is
a
it
New York
called?
Times recipe. It's called blue cheese swirl bread. And I will say, I made this bread. I'm a strong Democrat, and I made this bread every day of every time that there was a Democratic debate. I had this on hand. We used to host like debate watch parties, and this was always on the thing. So this is the fun part. Is you just kind of roll it and roll it and roll
Like a
it
nautilus.
like a nautilus, yeah. And then you set it in a heavily buttered pan, and then half an hour later, it is gigantic. So there,
Wow, it already looks beautiful.
it is, and like half an hour from now, it's just gonna rise.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that, Mary V. And we're going to go ahead, and once that rises, and then we're going to put it in the oven. So you'll get to
Yeah,
see the finished bread by the time we're done.
yeah.
Um, and I can already smell it. Is that possible, or am I
It's a blue
imagining
cheese.
that? Yes, it's
Yeah.
delicious. So that's
Oh,
going to give us
fantastic.
time while it's rising and baking to talk to Zeinabu a little bit. So as a veteran of independent film and video, Zeinabu Davis has produced numerous award winning works. Her vision is passionately focused on the depiction of African American women, their hopes, dreams, past, and future. Her interests include altering and diversifying the terrain of mass media, film history, world cinema, and folklore. She frequently writes and lectures on African and African American cinema. Welcome, Zeinabu. We're excited to have you here today. It's really an honor to have such an accomplished and talented filmmaker here with us today. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
Can you start first by giving us a little bit of background into how you got into filmmaking in the first place?
Um, the very short story is that I, when I was an undergraduate at Brown University in Rhode Island, I was granted a internship at a public television station, and I got hit with the bug of wanting to make films from working with another wonderful woman by the name of Jenny Booth. And she took me under her wing and allowed me to do all these different things for the show. And it was a public affairs show called Shades. And we interviewed all kinds of celebrities, including Dick Gregory and Bob Marley and a whole bunch of people who were in the Northeast, Ramsey Lewis, etc. Um, and then I was very fortunate to go to Kenya, East Africa for my study abroad program in my junior year. And I met a wonderful writer, another novelist by the name of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, And the skills that I learned in the internship that I did at PBS were skills that I was able to translate and use for Ngugi, because he and some colleagues in Kenya were actually putting on a play. And my job was to project the photographs of the Kenyan freedom fighters, while the actors were on one side of the stage acting out the story, and the um, people who were the elders who were actually the fighters for independence were on the other side of the stage talking about what it was that they did. And it was a very powerful experience. Unfortunately, it was one that was politically charged, and the government had the stage bulldozed after 3 days. More than 1,000 people had come to see it, but the government decided that the play was too seditious. But that proved to me the power of story and the power of media. And when I came back from Kenya, I was very fortunate to be able to get into UCLA's film school. And so that's where I got my training as a filmmaker.
Wow, well, that's quite an introduction. So, Mark talked a little bit about how the anthology, and in particular Marivi's story, Pandemic Bread, got into your hands. But can you talk a little bit about when you first read it, what you were thinking, and did you immediately think, oh my God, this needs to be a film? How does that process work in a filmmaker's mind when you see a story? What do you think about? How do you process it? What goes on in your mind?
I don't think it was like a very first thing that came to mind when I read the story. The story itself, you just need to appreciate the beauty of it, which Marivi just, really hit us with the reading of it just now. So, um, and it was personal. We lost someone, so we felt it, and um, it was one of those things where the story stayed with me after I read it, and I kept thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it, and finally, bugging Mark, should I ask YV if I can adapt it, or what do you think? And he said, yeah, go ahead, ask her. And luckily for me, she said yes. And
Lucky for all of
um,
us.
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
exactly. And the story is one where at the time we started the story, the process of adapting it to film, I thought it was going to be very simple because it only has three characters. So it seemed like it would be something that we could do fairly quickly. And of course, it didn't end up that way, but that was the intent initially, that it would be something very small. But filmmaking is a very collaborative process, and it involves a lot of people. So um, here's one picture right here. You can see this is the crew, and it's not three people.
Oh, it's
So
not.
it was like,
It's a big
okay,
team.
it was a big team. One time we had about 30 people on the set at once. So it just
Wow.
depended on what was going on. But um, the, the process was that I'm very lucky that Mark is also a very talented screenwriter, and so the the film went from the short story to the script, and this is the shooting script that I have up right now, and I'm on the page where you can see where this is the part that's exactly from where Marivi's call starts with the doctor. So you can see how we translated it from what her story was to what it would be when we put it onto the screen itself. But it involved a lot of planning. Um, we did things like this, which is called the mural boards, which is a overhead diagram of the locations. This is the location for where you guys are right now. This was Luz's kitchen, the table and the sink and where the bread was and all that. And then little circles here where we placed the camera. so the camera could move around and get various parts of the scene while we were shooting. And we were very lucky. We got some amazing actresses to work with us on the production, and um, we had this is Princess, myself, and then a local actress, Evelyn, and plays Princess's mother-in-law in the film. And Princess was very, very. She herself works as a hospice nurse, and she experienced things around COVID with end of life, and I was very lucky that she turned me on to this woman who plays the Remedios character, and this is Becca Godinez, who was this was her first film. We were looking for an actress who could play the Remedios character, but we had a really hard time because that I want to be respectful and as honest and reflective of what Marivi was writing. So we had to have a Filipina actress who actually spoke Tagalog as one of their first languages or primary language, and it was very difficult to find someone because most of the elder actresses were either in New York or Canada. They weren't in Southern California. But luckily for me, Princess knew Becca. They live in the same neighborhood in LA, and Becca uh, was basically convinced by Princess that she should be a part of the project. And then the
Who
other
is
person who came
who
into
is Princess Zeinabu?
Oh.
Princess Punzalan is a very wonderful actress who is well known in the Philippines, and basically kind of like um, one of the somebody who has an extremely long career in the Philippines doing various roles. Who's known for a long time on a soap opera where she played um, this character that has a very infamous laugh. And she came here in the States not thinking that she would be able to continue her career, but luckily for us, she has been able to act in various short films and feature films. She's in one a very beautiful film called The Yellow Rose. If anybody would like to see Princess, and then the third actress is I asked Marivi's story says it's Dr. Goldstein, but this is a Zeinabu Davis film. So Dr. Goldstein became Dr. Femi Balagoon, and so this is Claire, who plays Dr. Femi Balagoon, and Claire's husband is also a doctor, and she, also related stories of some of the things that medical workers that she knew had faced during COVID. So it was a lot of the people who were involved in production ended up being people who had somehow also faced um, COVID in various ways. So
Zainabu, can I ask you this? So you're renowned for your depictions of African Americans, especially women, in your work. So you
mm,
understand the importance of getting stories as authentic as possible and
mm,
inclusive as possible. You talked about finding actors that were native Tagalog speakers, but what were some of the things that you had to do? How did you accomplish that to be respectful and inclusive of the Filipino community when you're and the culture when you're putting this film together?
you use the people who are from the culture and community to be your partners. The best thing that we did with this film was to create a creative community And that community had to include other Filipino creatives, or at least other people of color who were also creatives. And, it was a process where I constantly consulted with Marivi. Mark and I constantly talked to Marivi to make sure we're getting stuff right. And we also had some other friends like Albert Iguera, who also helped us, and uh, Joseph Ramirez, who also helped us along the way. So we made sure that as we developed the screenplay, because we didn't want it just to be the call, we wanted the story to extend to show a little bit of the lives of the characters who are in the film. So you see a little bit of Dr. Femi's life, you see a little bit of Remedios's life, and you see a little bit of Luz's life before the call actually comes. So hopefully you'll get some idea of what the pandemic felt like for each of those characters before you actually see them in that hospital room.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Can you talk about the challenges of adapting the story from its short story format to screenplay, and then how it gets to be a produced film? And by the way, I don't know if I'm supposed to mention this or not, but I feel like I have to. I'd be remiss not to say it, that this was nominated for the Sundance Festival, which is a huge deal. And although it didn't win, it is a huge honor and a big deal. So I want to congratulate all of you on that, first of all. Before you even answer the question, I just wanted to say that because I feel like it's really important and quite an accomplishment.
Thank you. Um, we are hoping for a rich and full festival life, and hopefully people can follow us on Instagram, Pandemic Bread Film, and find out when we will be premiering the film and where you can see it. But I think the biggest obstacle for most of us as non-commercial or independent filmmakers is money. And, it takes an enormous amount of money to make a film, even a short film. Our budget is well over $50,000 for this film. And it's like, it's a 20-minute film. Most Hollywood films that are a half an hour long. They don't make that many, but most Hollywood films that are a half an hour long still have a budget of at least a quarter to a $500,000. Yeah, $1 million, so 250,000 to 500,000 for a half an hour, and we did it under $50,000. So I think that right there was very incredible. Um, I had amazing producers. I had Nikki Evangelisti from UCSD and Wayne Yang from UCSD and Christina Rhee from the Pac Arts movement. Just produced the heck out of this thing so that we could get it done and on time. So we raised the money for the film in an amazingly short amount of time, which still kind of blows my mind that we were able to raise the money that we did from UCSD, from other people, from other my colleagues at the communication department, and Wayne's connections with the uh, 7 colleges at UCSD. Everybody came together and allowed us to get the funding that we needed to be able to pay for the actors very minimal amount of money, but they did get paid, and a very minimal amount of money to the professional crew members, but they did get something as well. I was very fortunate that all of my crew members, particularly I'll point out my cinematographer, Norbert Shea. It was an incredible, gifted cinematographer who also, you know, took charge of helping me develop the other parts of the crew, the members of the crew. And all of my crew heads really went out of their way to be not just professionals who were on the set, but they also educated and brought up many of our students from UCSD, from San Diego State. We also had students from City College and from San Marcos that were on the production. We're about to have a connection with Southwestern College um, to hopefully work on the sound design and the sound mix. So we've been steadily developing a creative community here where people will work with each other, and hopefully this will get more people to make more films here in
Absolutely.
San
And I
Diego.
think it's a good time to remind people too, as we're nearing year end and people are looking for tax write-offs. And, I don't want to forget about the cultural arts and the importance of supporting the cultural arts. Now, is there a particular project or place that they can go to donate to support your work, Zeinabu?
Um, we will have that on the Pandemic Bread website, which is basically Pandemic Bread Film, www.pandemicbreadfilm.com. But I also just want people to support the arts that are already here and the organizations that are here in San Diego, because people, you know, sometimes might, they think about those things when there's a festival, but not necessarily year round. And the Digital Gym in San Diego, that's run by Media Arts San Diego, that does the Latino Film Festival, is a very important and vibrant part of our community, as well as, of course, Pacific Arts, who do the San Diego Asian Film Festival, the Filipino Festival, and there's various organizations here in San Diego that people can support throughout the year,
If I
not
can
just
just
the
add
festival.
something, Zainabu's being very modest, but Zainabu is a professor at UCSD. And what she did was she created this incredible, unique opportunity for both undergrad and graduate students of film to participate in a film project from multiple campuses: San Diego State, UCSD, San Jose State,
Mm.
Mills College, San Marcos. And she basically, these kids, undergrads and graduates, this was their first IMDb credit.
Wow.
They're one entry, and she was just so incredibly generous. I was talking to one of your crew members, and she said what Zeinabu did was every time she went into a meeting, she would take two or three of the undergrads or grad students so they could be in the room where it happened, and they could gain real life experiences that would otherwise have been unavailable to them as film majors. And you gotta credit Zainabu. She's the rising tide that lifts all boats.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a big deal,
Yeah.
Zeinabu. Congratulations. And our community is lucky to have you. They're
Yeah.
lucky to have Mark and Marivi and all our cultural artists. And we appreciate you all and are grateful for you. Any final thoughts before we pull out the bread and show you the finished product?
Oh my God, yeah. It's like,
Anybody else have any final thoughts? Zeinabu, Mark, Marivi?
I'm getting
Or do we just want to
verklempt
pull
right
out the
now.
bread? Are we all getting hungry? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
All right, let's pull out the bread and see the finished product. I cannot wait.
Do you have a knife
So-
to cut the bread?
Oh, do I have a knife?
I
Aren't we going to dig in with our bare hands?
mean, I guess at the
All
end
right.
of every successful
Here we
cooking
go.
show, you have the beauty
All
shot with
right.
the bread.
Coming out. Marivi, you should be carrying it. You created it.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna do the cooking show swap out.
Oh, look at this. Ah, isn't it gorgeous?
And for the shoot, I remember I made at least 2 finished loaves and 2 rising loaves. So, yeah.
So it's pandemic bread, but we're saying bye-bye pandemic. And
Yeah.
now what do we want to call it? Cultural
Oh,
arts.
I don't know.
Cultural arts bread. I don't know.
Yeah. Delicious bread.
So can we
Yeah.
dig in?
Yeah, please.
Oh, no. I want you to do the honors. You
Oh,
made this
okay.
beauty. And
Yeah, so
I'm
one
sorry.
more beauty shot. Like,
Yes.
so pretty.
And I'm sorry that you guys aren't here to share that with us. And that's why Marivi had to come to my studio kitchen.
I know, this is so much fun. I'm like, I'm living the life of like, I've always wanted to be on a cooking show. I was like, here I am. Like,
Oh my gosh.
so
This-
if you can see, like, this one has feta in it. So if you can see, it's like rolled up with feta, and it's
wow.
Yeah.
To this camera.
like, and oh, on this camera, clearly I'm not well versed on. Okay, so anyway, so that's a beauty shot, and Zeinabu and Marc have had multiple
Okay, wait a minute. I'm
roles.
sorry. It's,
Yes.
you know,
Dude,
it's not sitting here without us eating it.
yeah, and I'm gonna leave at least half the loaf for you and Amber.
Oh
So
my God.
it's
Oh.
better warm with butter, but you
Oh
know,
my God.
not so bad.
Okay. This is delicious. I'm sharing it with you out there in the virtual world.
New York Times recipe, not mine, so I don't want to claim credit. I'm just saying thank you for that. I must have made like gajillion loaves at this point.
Yeah, and so we thank you, Zeinabu Davis, Marc Chery, Marivi Soliven, our team behind the scenes, John and Amber, all of you in our virtual audience, those listening live on our public profile page, and also on our social media channels. And do know that if you click on any of our icons, any of our 4 icons, you can hit the follow button and follow us so that anytime we're on Fireside, you can tune in and listen to what these great creative artists are offering. And we also offer weekly interviews with authors on our Adventures by the Book Fireside. So if you follow me, you'll get notice of that as well. And our next Fireside event is coming up soon. It's going to be part 5 of our 5-part series, Thankful for Reading, where each week we're introducing a different author with a different book that we're thankful for this holiday season, and maybe something you want to pick up and read. We also, at Adventures by the Book, do Zoom events. We have our first ever Pitch Fest event in January, where we are bringing 20 authors, from debut authors to international best-selling and New York Times authors, to give a fun like speed dating challenge. They're going to be trying to pitch you their books for book clubs, readers, libraries, anybody who's interested in meeting authors or picking books for their 2023 reads, their programming. You can join us. That's free on Zoom. Just go to our website, adventuresbythebook.com. And in-person events, our next big in-person event is in February. It is called Superbook 4, and we're bringing 20 authors to San Diego in a day-long festival set up just like Super Bowl, with 4 quarters of authors, fan-friendly food. We're hoping to have an author who will sing the national anthem to open up the show. And we have renowned audiobook narrator Julia Whalen, who reads for Kristen Hanna, Tara Westover, and many others. Taylor Jenkins Reid, I'm sorry. We have the founding drummer of Maroon 5, Ryan Dusick, who will be here as well. It's going to be an amazing event. So we thank you all for coming. Check us out at adventuresbythebook.com. Congratulations, all of you, on the success of Pandemic Bread, the San Diego Decameron project, and the film. We enjoyed chatting with you today, and we'll see you next time. Until then, what is your next adventure by the book? Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Cheers. And